Picture a political science professor trying to explain a casino fire during a wine tasting in Martha's Vineyard. It's a wildly over-constructed sentence. You know the kind. An unfolding geopolitical embarrassment that is the Baroque opera of institutional hubris colliding headfirst with the caffeinated hallucination of American exceptionalism.
And then, right as you're mentally bracing yourself for this massive intellectual journey, Stephen Colbert casually throws a chair through the entire sentence with this brutal translation. These idiots lit their own pants on fire. He would take all that bloated, institutional, Shakespearean language and just drag it violently back into the gutter where we actually live. That was the trick, you see. It wasn't just comedy, it was translation.
Okay, let's dive into this, because it reveals a massive societal shift. I mean, why did we end up turning to a guy sitting behind a fake news desk for emotional truth while simultaneously treating the words of actual politicians, CEOs, and multi-billion-dollar institutions as entirely suspicious? We're looking at the total collapse of institutional trust here.
Section 1. The pants on fire. To understand what's really going on, we have to look at the underlying mechanics of what was happening on our screens. For 11 years, Colbert wasn't really operating as a comedian. He was much more like a simultaneous interpreter trapped right on the fault line between two collapsing worlds. On one side, you had the official, highly sanitized language of institutions, and on the other, the exhausted, emotional reality of the public being forced to consume it. Here's a slightly uncomfortable observation about us humans. We actually survive manipulation remarkably well. We've been doing it for thousands of years, right? Advertising manipulates, politics manipulates, heck, seduction itself is a form of manipulation. We survive all of that instinctively. But what we violently reject, what actually sets our alarm bells ringing, is emotional dishonesty that's blatantly packaged as sincerity. The exact moment an institution starts performing authenticity, instead of actually delivering it, we check out.
Section 2. A split-screen reality.
Institutions constantly act like we, the public, are starving for information. But let's be real, we're completely drowning in it. What we desperately crave is emotional recognizability. We just need someone to acknowledge the absurd reality we're all living in. And this brilliantly illustrates how Colbert's recurring segment, The Word, delivered exactly that. It acted as this dual-layered decoding architecture. On the left side, you've got the official public statement. We remain committed to exploring strategic pathways moving forward. And right next to it, the human translation. We have absolutely no idea what we're doing.
And the thing is, audiences recognize this split screen immediately. Not because it was some incredibly clever joke, but because we were already living inside it. You know exactly what I mean. You experience this split screen at work, scrolling online, sitting in agonizing corporate meetings, and even in your own relationships. There's the public, sanitized version on one side and the private, actual understanding on the other. Colbert literally just took that exhausting contradiction, gave it a stage name, and, well, threw some better lighting on it.
Section 3. The exhaustion machine.
Living inside that split-screen contradiction takes a massive toll on you. You simply cannot bombard audiences nightly with hypocrisy, corruption, political theater, and outright institutional collapse without creating immense emotional exhaustion. The modern news cycle basically operates as a relentless exhaustion machine. Surviving that, it requires a very specific kind of architectural design, which, believe it or not, explains the escaped monkeys and the random bears. If you really look at the show, it was packed with these totally absurd visual detours that felt completely disconnected from the heavy news cycle. But they weren't just random distractions. No, they were carefully engineered, absolutely necessary releases from the crushing tension of everything collapsing around us. As human beings, we literally cannot survive indefinitely inside high tension. So the show functioned as a pressure valve. It constantly oscillated. It was a walk through tension and release, a quick skip through sharp intellect, right into profound stupidity, a sit-down with true gravitas, immediately followed by absolute vulgarity. It operated like jazz, honestly, or even classic Greek theater. That structured release of pressure is exactly what made the entire collapsing machine of society feel survivable for just another 24 hours.
Section 4. Enter the Pathfinder. Now here is where we need to widen the lens a bit. When the official language completely stops functioning emotionally for the public, who steps up to build a new route across the wasteland? Historically, a Pathfinder was a highly specialized military unit dropped behind enemy lines in the pitch dark to solve the impossible with zero margin for error. Culturally speaking, this is the exact role translators like Colbert were taking on. He wasn't just an outraged guy yelling from a pulpit. I mean, outrage is easy, it's predictable, and frankly, it monetizes really nicely for the algorithm. No, he was actually charting a new path for truth when the old established institutional routes had simply stopped functioning.
And his actual weapon wasn't comedy. It was weaponized clarity. You see, clarity cannot be easily managed or spun by PR departments, especially when it's cleverly wrapped in humor. Humor lowers your resistance. It sneaks right past your ideological defenses and your sheer exhaustion. You laugh first, and then, 10 seconds later, you realize you've accidentally recognized something profoundly true, even if you kind of wish you hadn't.
Section 5. Trusting the clowns. Let's move on and see how this all builds up, because what happens to the people who translate the system too honestly? Well, the very systems they so boisterously clarify eventually become incredibly uncomfortable. Let's face it, institutions rarely enjoy being translated with that level of brutal honesty, and they will often try to silence or cancel the people capable of revealing their internal contradictions to the public. But by that point, the damage to the institution is already done. When institutional language becomes sanitized, performative, and emotionally dead, ordinary people just stop looking upward for guidance. Instead, we look sideways for translators. This is exactly why independent creators, podcasters, and long-form conversationalists increasingly sound way more alive and human than billion-dollar networks. When the traditional institutions go dead, the outsiders are basically forced to become the emotionally mature adults in the room.
So the crucial point we're arriving at here is that we are witnessing a modern update to that centuries-old adage, that truth is found in the mouths of babes and drunks. Today, the rule looks more like this. Trust the clowns, carefully. They're the last human-sounding translators who still admit the circus is actually on fire.
This leaves us with a pretty uncomfortable realization about the systems we navigate every single day. We might have started out thinking this was an explainer about comedy, but it's actually a story about the architecture of trust in a society completely drowning in performative nonsense, which demands we stop and ask ourselves, what kind of world are we actually building when we literally have to rely on clowns just to decode the reality around us?
And more importantly, what kind of human are we becoming while building it? I really want to leave you with that lingering, haunting thought. Take a hard look at the collapsing systems in your own life, the companies you work for, the culture you exist in, the stories you tell yourself to justify all these broken narratives. Because when the system entirely stops making sense, you don't need another generic productivity hack to survive it. You need an entirely different path.